To Sketch a Thief by Andy McGuire. Illustrations by Garish Manuel. Chapter 1. There's nothing quite like the feeling of being an actor in a play. The rush of pretending to be someone else, taking on his personality, his hopes, his dreams. In fact, it can be quite quickly become so much more than just pretending. You put on that costume and makeup and it becomes easy to think like your character, act like your character, and talk like your character. You are completely transformed. It's almost like magic, the way you forget who you are and become someone else. Unless your character is an artichoke, then you just feel like a fifth grader in a weird costume. Backstage in the New Leaf Elementary School auditorium, Micah Murphy was all dressed up but having trouble completely transforming. He was green, round, and bumpy from head to toe, exactly the way he was supposed to be, but he just wasn't feeling it. He had no idea how to think, act, or talk like an edible thistle, which was what he learned an artichoke was when he looked it up in the school library dictionary. No, he was still just plain old Micah, and that wasn't very exciting. He wasn't sure why he wasn't feeling it. He'd actually been excited to try out for Miss Petunia's latest food-based musical, Don't You Care at All? Normally, he had to be tricked into being in one of her strange productions, but this time he went into it with eyes wide open. Ever since Micah's recent gig as a Middletown tour guide dressed up in a historical costume, he'd come to realize there was a small part of him that actually enjoyed acting and even being in front of a crowd. Besides, all his friends were in the musical, and who wants to hang out by yourself after school? It was dark backstage, so it was hard at first for Micah to tell that it was Lydia coming toward him from stage left. She was wearing an enormous cardboard bowl filled with chunky gray styrofoam. "What are you supposed to be?" Mike asked. "Cream of mushroom soup." "I would have guessed clam chowder." "There's no clam chowder in this play." "Oh, I haven't read the script yet." One of Micah's other friends, Armin, came in through a side door and joined them. He was dressed in a red rectangular box with small black wads of construction paper coming out the top. "Did I really just hear you say you haven't read the script yet, Micah?" "Not the whole thing. I read my lines at the tryout. I just didn't read anything else." "How did you know what part to try out for?" Lydia asked. "Miss Petunia said I had artichoke written all over me." Armin looked him up and down and shrugged. "I can see that." Micah looked Armin up and down in return. "What are you supposed to be?" "A box of raisins." "Makes sense." "Does it?" Armin asked. Micah wasn't sure how to answer this, so he asked a question of his own. "Does it seem weird that we're wearing our costumes on the first day of rehearsal?" Lydia shook her head. "This is Miss Petunia's process. She believes the costumes make us embody the characters." Suddenly, one of Micah's other friends, Gabe, wriggled across the floor in front of them. He was dressed in a huge red sleeping bag with holes cut out for his arms and legs. There was no hole cut out for his head. He didn't say a word as he twisted himself around a corner and out of sight. "I think he's a gummy worm," Armin said. Micah shrugged. "I haven't figured out what this play is about yet, other than weird food." "It's about how certain kinds of foods like to hang out together," Armin said, "like in a soup or in a salad. But other foods always feel left out." Lydia nodded. "For instance, in scene 2, the bananas want to be in an omelet, but the eggs won't let them. And the cantaloupe and the M&Ms want to be included on submarine sandwiches, but the bread won't let them." "My mom would love this play," Micah said. "Whenever I tell her something sounds gross and I don't want to eat it, she's always telling me, 'You never know if it's good until you tried it.'" "Actually," Lydia answered, "the play is a brilliant commentary on modern relationships and how we're reluctant to trust others in an age of social isolation." What was that now?" "I think she means it's about how to be a good friend," said Armin. "Oh," said Micah. "Sounds interesting, I guess." Gabe slithered back around the corner, then wriggled his way across the back of the stage and out of sight behind a curtain. Thump, bump, 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 bang! Did Gabe know there's a staircase back there? Micah asked. I think he does now, Lydia said. Ah, my brilliant actors, gather round, gather round. Miss Petunia stood at the front of the stage with an enormous smile on her face. Micah watched several dozen kids dressed as foods make their way towards her from backstage in every corner of the auditorium. The brilliant actors looked on their fearless leader with varying expressions of excitement, confusion, and boredom. Micah somehow managed to feel all three emotions at once. We are gathered here today for one of the most exciting moments of my teaching career. Miss Petunia said, We are ready to start rehearsing Don't You Care at All, an incredible musical. I've been longing to direct all my life. Didn't she write it herself? Armin whispered to Mike and Lydia. I think she just finished it last week, Lydia answered. Miss Petunia cleared her throat to get their attention and went on. It's a food-based production which you've all grown to love and appreciate, but what you may not know is it's the first vegetarian musical ever performed on American soil. My brilliant actors, we are about to make history. A first grader dressed as a pineapple raised her hand. What's vegetarian? Miss Petunia looked surprised by the question, but no less enthusiastic. It means someone who doesn't eat meat. But how could a musical eat meat? A third grade turnip asked. Musicals don't eat anything, Miss Petunia said. Some of the food-based musicals Miss Petunia has written and directed. Something to talk about. Let us play too. Born and bred. What's at stake? Honey, do you love me? Give peas a chance. How waffle that feels. Plumb out of ideas. What I mean to say is that there is no meat in the musical. So it's the first musical without any meat in it, asked the second grade box of macaroni. I don't remember any meat in the Music Man, said a lime jello mold. No, I just meant, Miss Petunia started. Mercifully, she was saved by the banging of the double doors in the back of the auditorium as they flew open. Small people dressed in strange colors and shapes rushed towards the stage, following closely by a large fifth grader on a scooter. The boy on the scooter weaved in and out of the small people as they headed forward, keeping them in a tight circle until racing all the way to the front of the stage. They fell over each other in a large heap. They looked like a load of laundry someone dropped on the floor before folding it. Thank you, Chet, said Miss Petunia to the boy on the scooter. Beads of sweat rolled down Chet's face. Whew! Herding kindergartners is hard work. What are they supposed to be anyway? They're my vegetable soup. Carrots, onions, tomatoes, kale, etc. Miss Petunia answered in an excited trill. I knew the kindergartners would wander over to the playground after they got their costumes on. Chet, you did an admirable job gathering them back, and now you're free to go home from detention, unless you want to be in my musical too. Chet scootered out of there so fast you could almost see blurry lines behind him, like in a cartoon. Miss Petunia looked around at the actors. You've all had the opportunity to read the script by now. Are there any questions about the musical? Anything that doesn't make sense? Every hand in the auditorium shot up. The smile on Miss Petunia's face remained unchanged. On second thought, perhaps you'll understand it better once we begin rehearsing. Michael walked into the boys' changing room after rehearsal to take his costume off. Hans, an exchange student from Germany and one of Micah's least favorite fifth graders, was already in there. He was half-dressed in a long green tube of felt. He looked Micah up and down from the lumpy felt hat on his head all the way to the green galoshes on his feet. So what are you supposed to be? Anyway, you look like something my cat coughed up. I'm an artichoke, said Micah. What are you? I am the lead celery. No other celery has more lines than me. You're the only celery, Armin cut in, pulling the raisin box over his head. Hans handed his script to Micah and Armin to look at. Sure enough, it said lead celery on the top, in pencil, in Hans's own handwriting. Micah rolled his eyes. His artichoke costume was hard to pull over his head, but he had finally shimmied his way out of it with both ears intact. Hey, Armin suddenly shouted. Someone stole my sketchbook. Other kids who had been milling about in and out of the changing room stopped what they were doing. What sketchbook? Hans asked. My sketchbook, Armin said. I left it right here beside my backpack. I had all my best pictures in there. There was a drawing of my cat that I shaded so carefully you'd have thought it was 3D. Everybody should check and see if someone else is something. Everyone should check and see if anything else is missing, said Frank Millwood, the most popular boy in all of 5th grade. Unlike Hans, Frank really was the lead in the musical. He was the loaf of French bread with nearly 40 lines, and some of them were actually in French. Nothing's missing for me, said PB, in the form of a spinach leaf. I never lose things. PB was one of the school's 2 student news correspondents. He and his partner Jay had an afternoon news show that was broadcasted to every classroom at New Leaf Elementary. Or me, said Liam Pavel, a 3rd grade lasagna noodle. Or me, said Eric Lakota, a 4th grade slice of cheddar. One by one, everybody confirmed that the only thing that had disappeared was Armin's sketchbook. But why? And even more important, who took it? Suddenly, Armin shouted, Chet! A sketchy situation. I can't believe someone stole Armin's sketchbook. Who would do that? I know we have some mean kids in the school. Chet and Hans come to mind, of course, but who would mess with Armin like that? He's one of the nicest kids in school. We need to investigate. Who are the key subjects? What's the motive? Where was Armin's sketchbook last seen? Actually, this might be kind of fun. It'll be just like those cop TV shows. Maybe I should write myself a theme song. But that can probably wait. Between the musical and detecting, that's what detectives do, right? It's going to be crazy around here for a while. All I know is I need to have Armin's back. He'd definitely help me out if the shoe was on the other foot. A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need. Proverbs 17:17, New Living Translation. What do you think Micah and his friends should do first to catch this thief? How can you be a great friend to someone else in their time of need? Tune in to Chapter 2.